I came to know Larime as a folk hero among caricature artists out here. Larime has overcome a tremendous amount of obstacles to ply their trade on the Las Vegas Strip. And I first saw Larime's work at a show at Ralph's comic shop, the alternative reality comic shop, if you ever get a chance to go beyond the Strip, head to alternate reality comics owned by a wonderful guy named Ralph. And he has shows of various people's comic work. And he had a show by Larime Taylor. And I thought, this guy's pretty good. He gets a likeness. Never work with them, you know, but they're pretty good. Did you know they draw with their mouth? What? Oh my God, these are amazing. So Larime's gonna say a few words about the whole process, as well as some adventures that he has endured, that they have endured, trying to make a living on the rough streets of Las Vegas. So without further ado.
Hey, no, woo, woo, woo. She likes to cheer. She's a talkative dog. Okay, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Come on. Okay. Hi, so yeah, I'm a caricature artist. I've been drawing since I was little, you know, kids color and draw when they're little. I did it with my mouth instead of my hands. So that's how it all started, basically, you know, just coloring and drawing like anybody else. I had a junior high art teacher. I don't know if he's ever been a part of this organization or not. His name is Eric Kitzman, but he was a caricature artist, and he was a junior high art teacher. And I thought that was awesome that he could draw cartoons of all these people. And so he started teaching me, and I started working with him pretty much from the age of about 14 on. I did grad night with him every year for our local high school in Lake Havasu, and including my own grad night for all the people that were in my year. So I got to draw all them, and have been drawing caricatures off and on ever since. Didn't really do it full time until we moved here. And we moved here in large part because it was an opportunity to be able to do that and have a source of income. The comic book that I created that got us out of California and allowed us to move here. Comics are very short-lived. They have limited lifespans. You start out with number 1 sells 10,000 copies. By number 7, you're down to 3,000 copies. You're barely making enough to publish it. So, you know, that's the way comics are. I could make more in a week on the strip drawing caricatures than I could in a month of a comic book. So switched over to doing doing caricatures. And that's mostly what I want to talk about is the street artist experience and the law, because I don't know if any of you here, by show of hands, any of you guys do street art, or, you know, I mean, are you at booths, or do you do like out on the street independent on your own? Okay. Depending on where you're from and what the police in your area are like, you may or may not have been harassed or hassled or even ticketed, arrested, threatened to be arrested. I've had over 10 or 11 tickets in the span of 2 years. Had one bench trial that actually, because the local judge had no desire to touch the First Amendment issue with a 10-foot pole, which is funny because you're a judge, that's kind of your job, went ahead and convicted on the technicality of, well, somebody could trip over your table and hurt themselves, so you're obstructing. But that's not what obstruction is. And that's not how the law works. So we appealed, and it got thrown out on appeal immediately. It was overturned. But basically, where was I? That's okay. So yeah, basically got ticketed a bunch, had one conviction, got that thrown out, got lawyer. And I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to give legal advice. I'm not going to tell you what you can or cannot do. But what I will say is rule number 1 is get a lawyer, because the police will do what they do for as long as they can because they get away with it. They're the police. Who's going to stop them? And they can even be wrong, and they can even know they're wrong. But until a federal court makes them stop, they don't have to stop because they're the police. What are you going to do about it? And that's the attitude they take. That's the way they treat you. That's the way they talk to you. Is I don't care what the code says. I don't care what the Constitution says. I don't care what the law says. Out here, I am the law. This is what I say. Pack up your shit and go to jail. And that's literally been said to me probably a dozen times, is pack up your shit or go to jail. And never went to jail, but got a lot of tickets. So went and got a lawyer, actually fought them. And the first thing that you learn is that this has all been fought before. And it's been fought before dozens of times in dozens of places. And they don't want you to know that. They often, the beat cops don't know that themselves. They're not trained to know that. And they don't know anything they're not trained to. And Metro here has been sued at least 5 or 6 times in the last 3 decades, and they've lost every single one of them. They keep getting told to stop messing with the street artists, the street performers, the living statues, all of it. And they go, oh, okay, we'll stop. And they do for maybe 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, and then they start back up again. And they do it because they'll get away with it until they get sued again. And each time, the worst thing that happens is they get forced to pay out. And it's not millions. It's, you don't get rich doing this. You don't get rich suing them. The settlement that they did in my case was 150,000, and over 90 of that went to the lawyers because it was a 3.5-year lawsuit. And civil rights law, unlike injury law, is very labor intensive. There's a lot of hours that the lawyers put in on that. They have to write 80-page, 150-page arguments at every step of the way. They had to handle all 10 of my tickets. There was, a lot that they did for that. I don't begrudge them a penny of it. I totally get it. If we had taken it to trial, they would have gotten their fees covered separate from whatever award I was given, but that would have been probably several more years drawing it out, and then appeals and all kinds of things. And so we were just like, at this point, they were offering enough that the lawyers could cut their rate down and say, this will mostly cover it and still leave enough for us to have something to get by on for a while. And, we had enough to get by and to survive. So basically, art is free expression. It has been ruled to be free expression. The act of drawing is expressing. And the First Amendment is the right to free expression, not free speech. People always say, oh, it's free speech. No, it's free expression. And expression can be anything from money is free expression. They have ruled. That's why you can donate to political causes with dark money for unlimited amounts, because that's free expression. You can't limit it. So you are allowed to draw in the public square. And the public square is the sidewalk. It is the area where the public goes out and everybody has equal access to. So here in Vegas, I set up in front of the Bellagio fountains. I set up on the street edge of the sidewalk with my back to the street. And that is the public square. That is the public forum, as they say. And that is allowed there. And what the code they try to use is basically that you cannot obstruct the public right of way. And they actually have technical civil engineering definitions of what obstruction is. It's so many people per square foot per hour. It's actually 100 people per square foot per hour. We picked the code apart down to the letter, went down to 5 different departments at the county and asked questions and interviewed everybody that knew anything about the code to get the exact specifics, so that when I went out there, I would know exactly what I was doing and what to say to the cops. When they would try to ticket me, it didn't matter. They don't care. They don't even know what's in the code.
So it kind of catch-22.
So basically, threw me off again. That basically, we went down to the county, talked to a whole bunch of different departments, a whole bunch of different people, different sections of the county government, because one of the things they tell you is you can't do business without a license. Well, I'm not doing business. I'm taking tips. I'm not charging anything. Well, still, you're not allowed to do that. Yes, you are. Well, you have to have a permit from the county. No, you don't. So we went down, county doesn't give permits for that because there is no such thing. In fact, the setup they have out here in Fremont of the free speech zone little circles they have out there, that's unconstitutional. And Seattle tried that and it got knocked down. The only reason it exists here is nobody has sued them yet. So until they get forced to stop, they're going to get away with it and keep doing it. And the majority of the artists and people from the strip got driven up here to get them out of the strip and kind of focus them here in their little circles. And it largely took care of the problem from their point of view, but it's not legal and it's not constitutional. So we went down, talked about getting a license. There are no licenses for that. They don't do licenses for that. Obstruction, you have to slow down traffic to a point that people can't pass, basically. 100 people per square foot per hour. And I don't know if you've been out there and seen that sidewalk. It's huge, it's very wide. And I actually recorded and sat and counted all the people who went by. You get 100 people going by in a minute. So there's no way that I'm keeping 100 people from going by in an hour, which is what is legally supposed to happen, minimum. So I'm not obstructing. And on top of that, the code even includes a exception for First Amendment use, which is exactly what we do. We are artists, we are expressing ourselves, that is protected. They don't want to hear any of that. It is pointless to argue with the police because you're not going to win. They don't care. Until you get a lawyer that makes them do what you want them to do, they're going to do what they want. But we recorded every interaction with them. I have a voice recorder on my phone. It's very discreet. They don't even know you're doing it. If I would see them riding up or walking up, I would just turn that on, hit record, turn my screen off, just let it sit there on the table while they're talking to me the entire time. So in addition to their body cameras, which they eventually had to hand over in the lawsuit, I had a recording, voice-only recording of every interaction with them. And everything that I said, they did in all the written reports, because I would then write an after-action report every time I would interact with them of what happened and sent that to my lawyer, and it would match what was on the audio. And then when they got the body cam footage, it matched that. And everything was exactly like I was reporting it and like I was saying was happening. They were repeatedly belligerent. They were abusive. They will bully. They will do everything they can to just threaten you and scare you and intimidate you and make you go away. The other reason it's best not to argue with them is because that only makes them worse. And they get even nastier when you do argue with them. So that takes you back to get a lawyer. That is basically the moral of the story is get a lawyer. Civil rights law works generally on the back end, so you shouldn't really be paying anything up front. There is no, it's usually it's like injury law in that case, in that they don't get anything if you don't get anything, but they don't generally charge you up front, and they shouldn't be charging you up front. You want to find a civil rights attorney in your town or in your state. I basically got a lawyer that does nothing but sue Metro every day, all day. That's what they do. They sue Metro. They sue Metro for physical abuse, for unlawful arrest, for shooting the dog on a no-knock warrant, all kinds of things. You know, everything you can think of that Metro has done, they've sued for. They also represent the newspaper here and a number of newspapers in California. When it comes to here, over both their Freedom of Information Request Act, Freedom of Information Act requests with Metro, especially around the October 1 shooting. They represented a lot of different media on that because they were the ones that were filing for all the reports of what really was known by who at what time and what Metro knew and what the casinos knew and everything else. They were representing all of those different news sources. And then more recently in the BLM protests, all the reporters that were getting arrested and getting roughed up by the cops, they represented them as well. Sure, yeah. I actually got them referred. It's okay. I know, a guy comes running out of nowhere, you get all
You
excited.
know him, huh?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's okay. No, it's just somebody running. She has very specific opinions of what public behavior is, and people running. It's
Okay.
like, what are you doing?
Well,
So no, it's fine.
She's doing her job.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Zelda. It's fine. Later. We'll do it later.
Okay.
Zelda.
Okay.
It's enough.
Okay, that's enough.
Okay.
You had asked
Uh,
how
How,
I found
how
it.
did you retain the services of this law firm? Did you just call them up or?
There was another artist out there who, a husband and wife, he did caricatures and she did nature colored pencil, big drawings on large canvas, large whiteboards. And she actually hired a lawyer when she first started getting ticketed. So they recommended this lawyer to me. And initially, this was before I got ticketed. I was going to testify for her as another artist out there. But then I started getting ticketed and they're like, no, we'll actually just represent you. And so they took the case. But because Sylva and I got ticketed at the same time, if she had to be called as a witness in my case, they had to have different representation. So we had to get a separate criminal lawyer for their tickets from mine so that they could then be a witness at my trial if it ever went to that, and it never did. But every major city has civil rights attorneys in town. They're harder to find. They can be a little pickier because they can only take so many cases, and a lot of what they do, they don't get paid for years of the work. It's not an easy law profession. There are a lot of quicker, better ways to make money as lawyers, and that's not it. So I do really admire and respect what they did, because none of this would have gotten anywhere without their help, unfortunately, because police will just keep doing what they want to do. Our lawyers in particular, it was interesting because they both came from the ACLU, and one of them was at the ACLU the last time Metro got sued over this, and it was the ACLU itself set up a table out here on Fremont to give away free speech literature. And they mostly did it because they wanted to see what would happen. And they weren't disappointed. They got ticketed for having a table. And so, yeah, I mean, you want to find out, you find out. And so they sued over that. And the Ninth Circuit actually ruled that if the table is a part of your free expression, it is protected under the law. So if I am giving out literature on free speech or your rights or whatever cause I'm supporting, I'm allowed to have a small table with my literature on it, and that is fine. Or in my case, if I am drawing, I can have the table to hold my stuff because I can't hold it. So it has my, my sketch pad and has my pens and pencils and a light so I can see what I'm doing. My tip jar.
That was actually part of the reason why you became a folk hero out here, is because many caricature artists, I hate to compare us to the 3-card Monte people, which is who the police should be going after.
Right.
They grab their stuff and they run.
Right.
But you have a physical need for a table, whereas I could just hold a pad of paper and draw.
Right.
And so, yeah, tell us more about how that made for a very interesting test case.
Even outside of my specific case, before that, this case that the ACLU here brought did set the precedent that you can't have a table if it's involved. If you're selling things, you can't have a table. But if you are actually doing something that is involving free expression and the table is integral to your expression, you're allowed to have it. As a disabled person, it kind of doubly so for me because I have no other way of doing it. So it's also an ADA thing, which we also filed. We filed like 12 or 14 different counts against the Metro, one for each ticket. And then there were some ADA claim tickets as well, or claims as well, about specifically violating the ADA for not allowing a reasonable accommodation, things like that.
American with Disabilities Act.
Yeah, the American with Disabilities Act. And the Americans with Disabilities Act basically says that a disabled person is allowed to have a reasonable accommodation to do whatever an able-bodied person can do. So a small table for my stuff is a reasonable accommodation. And the funny thing is that we had to get all of the, well, first of all, we had to get all the tickets done before we could actually file suit, because if it's currently a pending matter, you cannot sue for something that has not legally been settled yet. So once my conviction got overturned, they were confident that at that point we could file. And instead of actually just hoping that the tickets would be dropped as they had been up to that point, that when the prosecutor, for whatever reason, was trying to make a name and pushed for a bench trial on it. We decided not to take that chance anymore, so we started filing a motion to dismiss on every ticket I got. And the motion to dismiss was like 56 pages. And it's really funny when you see a public prosecutor, just DA, regular DA, who's doing 150 cases in a day, and they get handed a 58-page motion to dismiss, and their eyes just glaze over and they start to cry because they're not even going to read it. They're
Make
just,
them
I don't
work
have
for
time
it,
for
yeah.
this. So they immediately just go, we drop the charges, dismissed. And so that basically slammed every one of them going forward. After that, they stopped even just prosecuting, but the cops kept writing the tickets. So when we finally filed, we filed immediately for a temporary restraining order. I was actually given a restraining order against the police. As strange as that sounds, it's a thing. You get a restraining order against the police, and that was kind of fun to be able to say. And for the duration of the lawsuit, they were not allowed to mess with me. They were not allowed to come up and harass me. They were not allowed to use any of the codes against me, because the federal judge took one look at the case and just kind of looked at Metro's lawyers and went, "What are you doing?" And the judge that we got is the only federal judge in the entire United States who open carries on the bench. This is a cowboy. He is a hardcore conservative, libertarian, Constitution above all judge. He's not a liberal. He's not, this guy is biblical. And he read them the riot act when they had to get in front of him and explain what they were doing. And the first thing that they did was they said, "Oh, well, the code is meant to protect the musicians," which is hilarious because they go after the musicians just as much as they go after everybody else. They go after, our lawyers are being representing a violinist who has been arrested and has violin seized. There are guitarists that have had their guitars taken, their little amplifiers taken. So for them to say in federal court that the code was written to protect the musicians was ironic, because they go after them just as much as they go after everybody else. And the judge went, "Yeah, I'm not buying that, because this is still expression." Their argument was, well, they can give out pamphlets on their art and talk to people about their art. And they're like, "That's not how art works. They are watching you draw." Unlike that's the main difference between me and a lot of other caricature artists, is that what I do is performance art. Because I draw with my mouth, I'll get people that will just watch. Regardless of who I'm drawing or what I'm drawing, they'll just watch because it's something they've never seen before. So there's a lot more of a carny element to what I do than a lot of what you do. And so I will often go an entire night without a customer, or without maybe more than one or two customers, but I can still do several $100 because I'll get crowd tips. And so I draw celebrities off my phone. I draw Baby Yoda under the Vegas sign. I draw whatever. Yeah, Baby Yoda, I can't even finish half of them. People want them before I'm even done. That got crazy. But so yeah, I'll just draw samples until I get a crowd and people start tipping. And some one here, a couple ones, a 5, 20. I get random hundreds. It depends on the person and the time of year and the time of night. And so there's a lot more of a performance element to what I do, which makes it an even stronger free expression case, in that what I'm doing is I'm not producing a product. I am performing for a crowd, as if I were singing, as if I were playing a guitar, as if I were preaching the Bible. I am performing for the crowd. And so the judge really didn't like any of the arguments they were giving on that, gave me the restraining order, and then COVID hit. So I got the restraining order right before COVID, and then, couldn't really use it. So they dragged their feet. They wanted to settle, but they dragged their feet on the settlement for a good year because of COVID, because they knew I wasn't going to go back out. So anytime soon, they weren't in a hurry to settle. It wasn't going to be a problem that was going to blow up on them anytime soon. So they dragged it and they dragged it and they dragged it and they dragged it. And then finally, the lawyers put out one of the body cam videos to one of the newspapers and talked about it a little bit. And Metro suddenly got very interested in actually doing something. So then they settled because it wasn't a good video. It didn't make them look good. But the main thing is they wanted it to go quietly because they didn't want the other artists in town and the other performers and everybody else to know that what they're doing is illegal. That what they're doing is not constitutional. It's not how it works, because they'd be back up to their eyeballs and crusty jugglers in 30 seconds if the public knew that. The vast majority of every artist, every performer, living statue, everything out there, they all took off the moment they started getting tickets. If they got tickets, they would go to the community court, which is itself a joke, and they would take the plea deal where, okay, I'll stay off the strip for 3 months and it'll go off my record and I don't have to pay a fine. And all of this is completely unnecessary. And the worst part about it is the public defender through the community court will tell you to do that. They will tell you that what you did is illegal, that what you did is against the law, and that it is in your best interest to take this deal and to find a real line of work and to not do it again. And that is the public defender's office complicit in what they're doing. And it really comes down to, it's because the casinos don't want any of us out there. Any money that is not spent in their casino floors is money they didn't make. And they don't want to hire us. They don't want to bring us in. They don't want anything to do with us. So, so that's why the county keeps doing it, because at worst, I think the biggest settlement they've had to pay out on any of these cases was mine. And it was 150,000, which to the county is nothing. It's a slap on the wrist. They already are still, they didn't even stop ticketing other people during that. And since I have been back out, they have tried harassing me again. The first time a couple of weeks ago, they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to hear anything. They were just like, I'm not going to ticket you. I don't care about it tonight, but you can't be doing this. And no matter what I would try to say to explain, tell them about the lawsuit, they didn't want to hear it. I'm walking away now, and they just left.
And now, at one point, I remember hearing you had a piece of paper from a judge
Yeah, that was the
Like-
that was the restraining order.
on your person, and they refused to look at it, right?
No, the restraining order they always took seriously, because that was from a federal judge. When you mention you have a restraining order from a federal judge, they suddenly listen.
Everything printed out.
But they never wanted to look at that. Yeah. And then they would show you what they say is the code, and it's not the code, it's their enforcement memo that tells them how to enforce the code. And when you point out that's not the code and ask if you can take a picture of it, they immediately put it away and won't let you see it anymore. But the first time, yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, I got vaguely harassed again. And then last week, I had 2 more officers come up and start to give the same thing. And it's always, you can't have the table, you're storing goods and materials. That's their argument, is the storing goods and materials, which again, in that same part of the code, they have the First Amendment exemption. And I said to them very politely, you're going to want to call your superiors and check with them first, because I've already sued you over this. And the last time I did, your department had to pay out 6 figures. So you might want to see if they want to do that again, because I'm game, but they might not be. So you'll want to check in. You'll want to check in and see if they want you to pursue this with me. And they said, okay. And they stepped away from me for a few minutes, got on their radios, talked to whoever they were talking to, and then they just left. They're never going to come back and tell you, oh, you were right. They're never going to apologize. That's not what they do. They just went, yeah, we'll come over here and talk, talk, bye. Didn't even tell me. So I'm assuming they got told to leave me alone, because they did. But so as far as I know, they're still hit and miss on whether they're going to mess with me or not. And that may be because for the 1.5 years of COVID, I haven't been out there. So it's kind of fallen off the radar for a lot of, these are a lot of new trainees, a lot of new officers. They rotate a lot. So it just may be that they haven't heard anything about this since they've been out there. I'm kind of curious to see how it goes going forward, because they've been slapped on this once before. I'm game to do it again if they want to, but I'd really rather just do my thing and be left alone. So that's pretty much my whole personal crusade against the police, and against Metro and the county and the codes. I figured I would leave a good portion open to questions, because I'm sure people will have them. So if anybody has questions, feel free.
I'm going to be greedy and take the first question before you get the mic.
Yeah.
What? The police obviously have been, the police and the casino security have been a major hurdle to overcome. Do you face any other dangers on the regular in terms of intoxicated people, et cetera, that are a little bit scarier for a person who doesn't, you can't necessarily defend yourself.
Right.
as well as,
Right.
as a giant bouncer type guy.
One of the most frustrating things in all of this has been the fact that as somebody who is out there doing what I am constitutionally allowed to be doing, instead of being able to look to the police as somebody that would help me in a bad situation, I've had to look at them as someone to be afraid of or worried about because they're bullies and will threaten to arrest me. So that makes things interesting. Now, I will, yeah, they've stayed ticketing me while people drunkenly walk through the middle of the Las Vegas Boulevard right behind me while they climb the trees and fall off of them and, you know, break their arm and all kinds of stupid shit. But I've only ever had anybody steal anything from me once in the entire time I've been out there, which is about 8 years. And it was one guy walked up and kind of looked down in the tip jar for a second, looked at what I was doing, looked down in the tip jar, and I thought he was maybe considering what to put in. But then he started kind of being a little too interested in what was in the tip jar. And so he just reached his hand down, plucked the 20 out and walked away. And I actually ended up chasing him down to the end of the Bellagio sidewalk. Somebody was covering my stuff for me. I almost had him. He didn't know I was coming up behind him, and I was literally an inch away. If he hadn't noticed, a second later, I would have been able to ram him from behind and knock him face first into the ground. But he just at the last second realized I was behind him and like stepped forward, lunged forward to get out of my way. So that's the only time I've ever been stolen from. I have had drunk people that will mess with my things and play with my light and do, you know, yeah, I mean, drunk people are drunk people and they do things like that. But most, yeah, it's funny because all the costumes, all the beer and water vendors who are actually breaking the law, they all kind of look out for each other and for me, and will kind of keep an eye on me and help out. I've had drunk frat bros come up and bear hug my dog and ask me in the middle of the bear hug, is she friendly? And I'm like, well, you're going to find out, aren't you? But
Never bitten anyone.
no. But she does let them know what she thinks when they let go. I know that guy ran once and you're all like up in his business. And she's like looking for him now. She saw you walking by and started to growl because she's like, he ran in here. No, it's okay, Zelda.
Come say hi after we're all.
Yeah, we'll introduce you. But yeah, so I mean, theoretically it could be more dangerous out there than it is, but humanity so far has been decent, and you'll actually find that if you kind of let the decency of humanity back you up, more often than not, you aren't disappointed. Although that was a few years ago, things have gotten weird lately, so I don't know, we'll see. But yeah,
There's a question from the Zoom that I will read out.
sure.
Do you find that the police actually go after the artists instead of the scammers? People we can't run as easily. There might be a little typo there, but
Yeah, it's totally, that's exactly, and I can give you an example of this. This is exactly the case, is we're easy targets. For example, one of the tickets I got was from an officer who was training a rookie cop. And when they hit the street, all the beer and water vendors just let go of their coolers and ran and left their coolers there. So I'm sitting here at my table and there's like 7 different abandoned coolers all along the sidewalk within 100 yards of me in each direction. And they come up to me because I'm still here, and he wanted his rookie to write somebody a ticket, seize property as evidence, and book it into evidence. So I got to be the guinea pig that got my table taken and a ticket written. Meanwhile, there's $600 in like beer sitting right there. And they left it. They didn't take any of that with them when they left. They took my table and they left because the exercise was done. It wasn't about actually enforcing the law. It was about getting his rookie the training. And so that day, all the coolers, all the beer and water vendors got their coolers back. Usually when they ditch them like that, the police will go and round up every cooler they find, pour everything out into the street, and then impound the coolers. But that night, they just left them all there, because didn't feel like actually going around and picking them up. So yeah, we are easier targets. They come after us because they know we aren't going to just pack up and book it. Like the 3-card money guys, they'll leave their setup there. They'll leave their table and their cards. They can get a new one. Yeah, they'll just immediately book it as soon as, and I actually know somebody who was a beer and water vendor who got the fall for a 3-card Bonnie person. The 3-card Bonnie people all said that he was their ringleader to throw them off of them. So they got deals, and he ended up being in like solitary for 2 months, not even knowing what was going on arrest, because they said he was the ringleader. And by the time he got out, they were all gone, and he was left holding the bag. I don't know what ended up happening there, but yeah, it is ridiculous. No, if you see that, just get away from that. But yeah, it's all about the easy targets and low hanging fruit. It really is, and so they'll go for whatever's the easiest. And I'm about the slowest of all of us, so I get hit the hardest, but and that's fine. I knew that when this was all going on, I can't flip burgers, I can't clean restrooms, I can't deal cards. There's nothing else I could do here in Vegas. This is what I do. This is how I make a living. This is the one skill I have. And so I was going to let them arrest me if it came to that, because what else am I going to do? And I even said that to one of them at one point when they gave me attitude about finding a real job or make some legitimate money. I'm, well, first of all, this is legitimate money, and secondly, what do you suggest I do? Name a job I can do. And he just kind of sat there, and exactly, so this is what I do. But yeah, so any other questions, other people? Yeah, they're bringing you the mic.
So I'd like to thank you for your service.
Okay. Yeah.
Straight up.
I know. Yay. Yay. Yeah, she likes to cheer. She's not mad.
I was wondering if you know anything about like what seems to be like the special status of the Fremont Street experience, because it's weird, right? It's like a hybrid commercials, public way.
The Fremont experience itself,
Yeah.
I believe is its own private thing, but it does have some kind of a partnership with the city that I don't pretend to understand. Yeah, I really don't know what that setup is here. I do know that Seattle tried an exact same kind of thing where there was a limited number of spots in front of their convention center because they were having artists and performers and balloon artists and clowns and all kinds of stuff, and crusty jugglers, and so they wanted to get rid of all of them. So what they did is they set up you have to register, and then when you're registered, you get a spot, you get assigned a spot, and that spot is your spot for the day. And all of the spots were away from all the foot traffic of the convention center, so you didn't get anybody, etc. And they got sued over that. And it was found to be unconstitutional because you cannot require a permit for public expression unless it's a large group over a certain amount. Then you have to have a permit for a demonstration, etc. So if Joe Artist wants to go set up, they don't need a permit. They never will. So that part of it was just flat out unconstitutional on the face. The second part they found unconstitutional was the setting specific places that are only, the free speech zone. The reason they got away with it back when there's lots of protests during the Bush administration was because it was huge groups and there was like public right of way and public safety, concerns and things like that. So they set up their free speech zones where they could put a whole bunch of people to, yell where no one will see them. So again, that didn't fit here. And that was also considered unconstitutional. You cannot tell people you can talk here, but you can't talk there. So the whole thing basically got knocked down, and it's the exact same kind of setup they have here, where you have set spots and you have to have the spot assigned to you, and you're the right person to be in that. No, none of that works. It's first come, first serve. It's the public square. It's the Wild West. It's chaos. It's supposed to be, and that's the way the First Amendment is supposed to work. Is whoever gets there first, that's their spot. And if their crowd is so big that they are completely shutting down traffic, at that point, yes, you can actually disperse them. But until it gets to be that big, there's not really anything that you're supposed to be able to do about it. on the strip, for example, I've seen mariachi bands that will get crowds so big that people literally do have to step down into the street and walk on Las Vegas Boulevard off of the sidewalk to get around their crowds. That, yes, cite that, shut it down because the crowd's too big. If they can't control their crowd, they don't get to have a crowd. When I'm working, I always try to pull my crowd in. Hey, come closer. You can see better. Make sure people behind you can get by. I always do the best I can to keep it from becoming an obstruction so that they can't say I'm obstructing. And because I don't want to be a nuisance, I really don't. But as far as the legal setup of what's going on here with Fremont and whether it's public or private, I don't know. I do know the Fremont experience is its own private thing and has its own private security, but I do know that they also have state marshals that are also all over it, and they have. I think it's supposed to still be public, yes.
It's on the sidewalks that are abutting casinos. I think that's their property.
Mhm.
But I believe the street itself is still public. It's
Mhm.
got a canopy over it.
Yeah.
It's still public property, which is why they're giving their zones
Right,
and why you could challenge this.
right. Yeah, basically, if somebody wanted to try to knock down Fremont, I mean, they could try. There is a caricature booth on Fremont. I believe, at least last I checked, there was. And see, I originally was going to look at Fremont, and I was told that as long as there's already a vendor somewhere on Fremont that does what you want to do as a private individual, you can't do it. Which, again, free expression, that doesn't quite seem to make sense to me. But so that's why I gave up on Fremont. But okay, on Monday, 2 different portraitors on Fremont. Okay, were either of them doing color? Okay, I'm trying to figure out if,
Black and white for sure. I believe the other person was doing black and white as well.
okay. Then they may have, because it is not actually, with the current setup, they may allow that now. I don't know. I've seen people out there selling, just today, I noticed somebody out there was selling Indian jewelry. And so, and I know there's tons of stalls around here that do that. So maybe that's changed. But it didn't seem like it was really legitimate the first time I was told that you couldn't do that. So somebody may have challenged that. But yeah, if
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
There might be something scurrying. They're not telling you
right,
the truth.
but yeah, no, the whole Fremont setup, I don't understand, and it is entirely unconstitutional the way it's being done. But again, until somebody actually files a suit against them from actually having been harmed trying to do it, being ticketed, being driven off, whatever, it's not going to change because they have no reason to. Yeah, the other reason that I work independent is because when I started getting ticketed, I went to all the different caricature booths in town and none of them would hire me. And the reason given was that they would have some anarchy and revolt in their stalls because everybody would want the guy that draws with their mouth. Nobody would want them. I would be getting all the customers, et cetera, et cetera. And so it wouldn't be fair to the other artists. And I'm like, that's also a lawsuit waiting to happen, but I'm not going to deal with that. The county's a bigger target anyway. So went for the county.
But there's a guy in our organization and he's in my area and he's close to me and he draws with 2 hands at the same time. Now it's not something I was going to do and that I set out to do. I'm an art teacher and was gigging and my dominant hand is, get worn out and stuff. So I practiced for a few years. And the first time I did 2-handed gig with him, he said, Joni, that's my shtick. You can't do that. And I said, well, don't worry, so-and-so. I said, we'll market ourselves differently. My style is very different than yours. And I started researching online. There's many other 2-handed
I
artists
saw one on YouTube the other day.
out there. And they all have different things. Some erase, some don't.
There's
some
other
do
mouth
this,
artists.
There's all kinds of artists. So, anybody says that to me again, I'll just say, well, and people say, oh, you're the only one I'm out there. I said, no, I am not.
Mhm.
And I give our friend as an example. And I said, I also know somebody personally in Florida, and I know someone in Northern Ohio, and I know someone in California. I said, it's not often that you see it, but
It exists. Yeah.
but it's rare, but it's there.
It's like, I know one of the reasons I draw on things with my mouth is that in preschool, they wanted to, and I went to a disabled children's preschool. They wanted me to use my hands. They kept trying to get me to use my hands, use your hands, write with your hands, draw with your hands. So put it in your mouth, you'll get lead poisoning, which is funny because pencils haven't actually had real lead since the 60s, and I was born in 76. So, but one of them was familiar with mouth artists and was like, just let him put it in his mouth, see what happens. And I wrote the entire alphabet. And they went, okay, are we done? So, and they stopped at that point trying to make me do it with my hands. I know a little girl here in town who has my condition, who does use her hands because they got her to do it. And so she does. And she's actually not bad with her hands, but she has a little more movement in her arms than I do. But, it's a case by case thing. But there are other mouth artists out there. I know of several. And there's one that does pen and ink and does more portrait realism style. There's painters. There's some that use their feet. There's all kinds. Yeah.
You're leading right into the question I wanted to ask, which, I'm all about the mechanics of everything. And
No, I can't draw with my feet.
no, I don't know if you were planning on drawing in the room with us later or doing any sort of demo, but could you just tell us a little bit of the mechanics of what you have to think about and do as a caricature artist with your mouth? Do you need a special pen? Do you have to do exercises to be able to do this as often as you do?
It is exercise in its own way. And I found that out when I didn't do it for a year and a half during COVID and put on like 50 pounds. It actually, because I'm leaning over drawing like this the entire time, and I sit up to talk to people and I lean over this, I'm doing sit-ups all 5-6 hours straight. I'm doing sit-ups constantly.
Their core is like super strong.
And because I've been drawing since I was little, I've had the neck of a linebacker since I was about like 6 years old. I've always, whenever you do school portraits and you had to have a button-up shirt to look nice, I had to have like a shirt that was 10 times too big for me because you couldn't button the neck on a kid's shirt because my neck is huge. And my jaw muscle in my jaw is huge. I have a big jaw, big neck because I use it so much. But some of the things I've learned, because especially now I draw digitally as well, which has become more of a thing in the last 15 years. Until then, it really wasn't. And I kind of wish that it had been earlier because my art has grown so much since I've been able to draw digitally. When I draw digitally at home, I can sit up. I have a Cintiq tablet that's screen set up and I just draw directly in front of me. I don't have to lean over. I can sit comfortably straight up and I have more reach. What I was going to say is drawing on paper, I can only work at standard 8.5 by 11 paper size. I can't do your typical 11 by 14 caricature size paper. It's just too big. I can't reach all of that. I have to work smaller, which means I can't fit more than maybe 3 or 4 people in the drawing unless they're tiny postage stamps. And I always feel bad about that. I'll do it if they want me to, but I always feel bad about it.
They're still good.
And I personally just do a quick pencil sketch because my face is so close to the page. I have to map out my drawings because I lose perspective and proportion. So if I want the features to not be all crammed and bunched or whatever, make sure I have enough space, I have to map things out really quickly to give myself guidelines to work from. So I can't just, I really am jealous of all the caricature artists that just look and then just start with the eye and just draw the eye. Or my junior high teacher would start with the jawline. He would just do the jawline, put in the ears, put in the hair, and then do the face. And I can't do that. I have to map the whole thing out because I'll realize, oh, I didn't leave enough room for the hair on top, and it's going to get cut off the top of the page. Or wait, the chin's too low. I need more space.
Because your face
too
is
high.
right there. You're zoomed into
Right,
the
I'm
paper.
so close to it. When I'm drawing, I'm literally like 3 inches from the page. So
If they don't use the guidelines as well, because they're having to work so close to the page, the person they're drawing is up here. That'll distort the perspective if they don't have guidelines on the page.
and things at the top of the page will be spaced improperly, and things at the bottom of the page will end up being a bunched together because they're closer to me. So I have to, like I said, I have to map it all out. But my lines also, side to side, I get really good fluid lines, but up and down, especially when I'm drawing On paper like this, where it's further away and coming at me, the lines don't like to stay straight, so I often will turn it sideways and do the lines, do all my longer lines side to side that way. I personally just do a quick pencil sketch, and then I use Sharpie because that shit never fades. But I know people just use Crayola markers. I've seen people use $500 fancy pens. I use Sharpies because they're permanent, they're cheap, they're easy, and they're not too fat tipped. Like the Crayola markers are kind of fat tipped, and they get even fatter as soon as you start drawing on them because the tip gets broken. Sharpies have a stronger tip to them, and since I'm working small to begin with, I can't have really thick lines.
Now, I don't know if you, some of you may follow Larime online, but you've got an online presence as well, and that helped out during COVID.
Yeah, during COVID, I switched to doing everything through Twitter. I would draw a celebrity and tweet it at them, and 9 times out of 10, they wouldn't even notice because they have 500,000 followers or 5 million followers or whatever. But people that follow them might notice, and then people that followed me would retweet it and it would gain some traction. Everything shut down in March for COVID. That end of March, early April, when Easter came. Easter weekend, I had drawn Patton Oswalt, the comedian. I drew his daughter and tweeted it at him, and he lost his mind. And so he retweeted it to his 4 million followers. And over Easter weekend, I ended up getting about 15K in pre-orders, people wanting caricatures. So in that one weekend, that pretty much got us through the rest of the year, or a good 6 months.
Yay, Patton Oswalt.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was drawn for a good 5-6 months to work all that off, and I told people it's going to be a while because I have a long list. I had about 500-600 people, and I was doing about 30 or so a day.
We're trying not to clap at everything because we don't
Oh,
want
it's
to.
fine.
We don't want to upset your dog
No,
again.
it's fine.
But there's
She doesn't get upset. She just cheers. She's asleep right now.
you have my unending admiration.
Well, thank you. But yeah, when I'm out there, some nights I'll do a decent number of people, and decent number for me is 10 to 15. I know when you're doing, I think 26 faces is the most I've ever done in a night. I know a lot of you guys, that'll do festivals and things like that. You can draw 50 to 100 people in a day. I burn out faster than that because I have to lean on the table, and my arms and my arms start hurting from leaning on them, and my back starts to cramp up and such, and my hips. So it's mostly my hips and my arms. So doing more than 20 or so at a time is kind of, and even at home when I'm working upright, I can do 30 or 40 maybe a day and take breaks. But after a while, I start to kind of just fade.
Okay, well, we have time for one more question, if anybody's got one.
Sure.
Here, we'll give this over to David here.
First of all, I want to thank you for your very inspiring, courageous, and informative story. And my question is, I didn't get your name, but could you please say that again so people would know?
Larime, Larime, and last name is Taylor.
Is what?
Taylor, Taylor.
Is that your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is XLarimeX.
XLarimeX, thank you.
XLarimeX.
I'd also like to suggest to the International Society of Caricatures board that they make your video here be available in the public domain. Maybe put it on YouTube or
I'm fine
Facebook.
with that. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm fine with
excellent,
that, yeah.
excellent. That's not the question though.
Okay, yeah.
There is a case that a friend of mine named Steve White, he's a long-haired, pot-smoking, hippie, itinerant artist, sued the city of Sparks, and he won. And I would,
Oh, is that the painting? He's a painter?
yes,
Yes.
I would like everybody to write down the citation, write down White versus City of Sparks.
Yeah.
And
That even
It's-
went further than I expected in that they not only said that you have the right to paint or draw, they said you can sell, which normally I always say it's for tips. It's whatever you want to give me. I don't name a price because then they can get you for selling. But that case, they actually ruled that you can sell.
thank you for that point. The awesomeness of that case is you could sell, you could exhibit, you could display. And the city of Reno in 2014 made law legal. It's in the Reno Municipal Code. You don't need a license or a permit to sell your own self-made created art that you made
Right.
yourself. If you're a photographer, you could sell your prints. If you're a dancer, you could you're not charging for tips. There's a tip jar there. It's not a
Right,
problem.
right.
If you're a caricature artist, as you said about the public domain, you could be on a public sidewalk or you could be in a park. And the cops there actually have protected the artists. One time I was in front of Harris, and a private security guard came up and says, "You got to get the hell out of here." I said, "I'm on a public sidewalk." And they go, "Harris owns it." I go, "No, they don't. Call the cops." Cops came and told the guy to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
So Reno was one of the first cities that made art legal that way.
Yeah.
Steve White also went to some cities in Arizona and did that. But
Okay.
the beauty of it is when you have that case, sometimes the cops stop dead in their tracks. May I add one thing, if anybody's really curious about this and you want to do this, if you go into a new city, a lot of times they're not going to know about that. First, what you do is you call the city attorney, you let them know about that. You send them a text, you send them a registered letter, you send them an email, you prepare them that you're going to be there. You send them a copy of White versus City of Sparks. And then if you really want to go full bore, you get your ass arrested and thrown in jail. Then that'll initiate a federal civil rights suit.
Yeah.
We discussed that when they talked about getting arrested and wait for suit if we had to, because just the tickets so far, but an arrest would definitely.
And they've threatened to arrest me a few times and they never did. And they don't want to because it's a huge pain in the ass. But since the lawsuit was settled, and as far as I'm concerned, it's over and been settled, I'm allowed to do what I do. We've talked about it privately that, I have decided that they are not going to make me pack up this time. That if they do the pack up your shit or you're being arrested, I will give Sylv all the personal belongings we need, like, the money, the cards, things like that, the dog, the keys, and I will send them home and I will stay there and make them arrest me. And I will sue again, this time with an arrest on it. And if they, had to pay out for 10 tickets, I can imagine what an arrest is going to do. And I'm done playing their game. I'm done letting them bully me. It's ridiculous. And they'll keep doing it as long as they think they can get away with it.
A lot of artists are not up on the law because
No.
we're artists, we're creative people.
And
So-
it's so ingrained in society that the police are the law and they tell you what to do and you do what you're told and you're supposed to respect their authority. And it's just so ingrained in us that what they tell you is right and you're supposed to listen to them. And it's really, especially in recent times, become a problem in that they take that way too far and they just expect to be followed and listened to regardless of the legality of what they're telling you.
May I just mention that the case White versus City of Sparks, it's not just the City of Sparks, is what the cops try to tell you. It's in the jurisdiction of the 9th Judicial District, and that covers
the Ninth Circuit,
11
yep.
Western states, even the Marianas Islands and Guam.
Yeah, it's the same one that the ACLU suit about the table on Fremont that they upheld and said you can have a table involved in your First Amendment free expression. That's the Ninth Circuit as well. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you very, very much.
Yay! Woo, 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 woo. I know everybody's happy. Everybody's
Stick
happy.
around. We're